Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be using charcoal. You know that our learning goal right now is to experiment with different types of medium, and today specifically is going to be charcoal. There are really two things that are going to be a lot different with charcoal, and it's primarily gray ground, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes, and blending, which a lot of you are probably a little bit more familiar with. You remember them, the terms and stuff like that, but gray ground is really going to be the big one. We're not using charcoal paper, so it's going to go on a little bit goofy in the beginning because I want your practice to be on less expensive paper. But the first thing you're going to need to do when you get a sheet of paper like this, in fact, all of you should have a couple of sheets of paper, I'm going to ask that you kind of look at it and try to find the side that's a little bit more textured. Every piece of paper that you encounter, or almost all pieces of paper that you encounter, are going to have one side that's a little bit smoother and one side that's a little bit more textured. So you want to find the one that's a little bit more textured. Charcoal is a really heavy, dense material, so it's going to go on, because it goes on so heavy, it needs something to grab it. That's called tooth in the paper. So we want to find the side of the paper that has the most tooth, the most bite. Once we do an assignment, a still life over a couple of days with charcoal, I'm going to give you a piece of charcoal paper and you'll have more success. But today we're kind of experimenting with the medium. We're getting familiar with it. So what you're going to need is a piece of paper with the tooth side up, the textured side facing you. You need a little piece of charcoal, an eraser, which becomes an incredibly convenient tool when you're using charcoal, and a piece of paper towel. You want to make sure that your paper towel is really wadded up like this and then kind of open it up as I talked about a few minutes ago. So once you have that, you can kind of get moving. And what we're going to start off doing is what we've done in the past with some other mediums. I'm going to ask that you create a sphere. I want you to start off with a sphere. This is just a circle that I'm going to make into a sphere, but you're going to start off with a sphere, and then I'm going to ask you to create a value scale. Now here's how I want you to approach this that's different from the way you've approached it with, say, graphite or Sharpie or ebony pencils and things like that. I want you to create what I'm calling a gray ground first. So with the gray ground, what that means is essentially is that you can kind of shade the entire shape first. So there's my value scale. Now we know in a value scale that one side of this is going to have to be very light. So that means I'm going to peel off with my eraser later on. But right now what I want you to do is to experiment with the gray ground. So first, you're going to just cover the whole area, and I'm going to ask you, you can blend in two different ways, but I'm going to ask that you blend the whole thing first. You can either do it with your fingertips like that, which is not real good for the paper, but I don't care about that because I'm practicing right now, and I don't expect my artwork to last 100 years. If you want it to last 100 years, you should use some blending tool. Anything could be a blending tool. Tissue works really well. This brown paper towel will work as well. So you can kind of use this, and you can kind of create what we call a gray ground first. So you have a value scale right here, and you have your sphere over here. Once you've got a gray ground, which is just an area that is all a sort of middle value gray, which will be somewhere in here, then you can grab your charcoal and you know, okay, well my value scale has to be darker down here and it has to gradually get lighter. But because you're blending, you're going to be able to kind of do this in piecemeal and do one part at a time. So you can go like this and you can put it down a little heavier right here. And conversely, you can take your eraser and you can kind of erase down here. You know that this is going to have to be like white of the paper. And then you can kind of just gradually erase a little bit here and then blend. And you're going to have to do a lot of layering. So you're going to have to erase, blend a little bit, erase, blend a little bit. And then you're going to have to add more charcoal and blend a little bit and do it in piecemeal. Now I can already tell when I add charcoal right here to try to make it dark, the minute I blend this, a lot of it kind of wipes away right now. And the reason it's wiping away is because this isn't charcoal paper and the paper isn't holding it as well as it should. Once we have other charcoal paper like this, I'm going to be able to put down darker areas like this and then kind of blend them with a piece of tissue or a piece of paper towel. And this paper, because it's heavier and it's got a lot of tooth on it, it's got a lot of texture that you're not going to be able to see from this video. But because of that, a lot of it will stay down. But right now, because we're just practicing, I want you to just kind of work with what we have. So if this is my sphere, obviously, if my light source is coming from here, I'm going to kind of make this side a little bit brighter, like that. And with charcoal, you can always make the background, You can have a background color if you want, something like that. And on this side, I'm going to add darker values. And I want you to just kind of experiment with the blending in the gray ground right now. The more charcoal you add, clearly, the darker it's going to be. And the more you use your eraser, clearly, the more you're going to take up. And so try to find as many values as you can right now between your eraser and your charcoal and layering. So I'm going to give you about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes to kind of play around with this material and do this. Once you've done this and you've started making a more complete sphere, and I would spend many minutes on this, far more minutes than I'm going to do in this demonstration. But once you do this, you can always go back in, and because charcoal's so messy, sometimes it helps to straighten out lines like this. A lot of people like to do that, or add, make it look like it's actually a circle instead of a big blob of charcoal. You can go back in and you can make it a little bit more dense. They also have things called charcoal pencils, which are just like a pencil, except for instead of graphite on the inside, it's charcoal. So we can use those and pull them out. It'd be one of the last steps that we take in a drawing, but you can pull those out and add a few lines here and there that are more concise. In this, your eraser is such a powerful tool to add highlights in this. You can kind of work on this. So I'd want to blend it just a little bit more like this and kind of peel off in a few places and then add on in a few places. Ultimately, we know that this would have a shadow as well. So a shadow would probably be cast like this. And so I'd want to kind of get a shadow in there at some point and start playing around with that kind of thing as well. And again, this right now looks like a mess, but that's really because of two reasons. One, I'm not spending the time on it that you're about to. And two, this paper is not going to hold it as well. So if in the beginning it starts getting frustrated, or you find yourself getting frustrated, don't worry about it. On your second piece of paper, once you've spent a few minutes doing this, if you're done before, a lot of us or something like that, and you want to move on, you can start trying to play around with the same idea, but maybe look at one of your desks, at the still life I've got on your desk, and you can start kind of doing a bottle or something like that. One of the wine bottles I have on your desk, or one of the shapes. If you've got a cone or something on your desk, you'd rather do that, you can do that. But I want you to start again with a gray ground like this, and then kind of blend the whole thing. And you can go in the shape of the bottle if you want. Remember, a bottle's rounded, so your motion should probably be rounded like that. And kind of get the whole thing kind of colored in gray like that first. I saw a lot of you trying to blend with graphite, so I know some of you are going to want to do this anyways. Then once you do that, again, you can kind of go in and go, all right, what side? It's going to be light. And then I would use the eraser as though it's a pencil. So I would kind of make some lines, and your lines are going to be imperfect, they're going to be broken, so you can kind of approach it that way. And then I'm going to have some sort of shadow that gets cast like this, and I'm going to want to tighten this up and make some darker values over here. And I think at this point you're getting the idea. So I'm going to pause. When I say go, I'm going to want you to make sure that you have all the materials you need, and then remember, begin with a gray ground and start blending, and then experiment with charcoal. Ready, go.